welcome to another episode of Two Who's Review. I'm Alex,
I'm Fitz.
and today we're looking at Bad Wolf, the first episode in the two-part finale to Series 1 of the Revived era.
Neat.
Exciting times. I think we mentioned this briefly at the end of the previous episode 2 weeks ago, but we're doing this story separately, unlike other two-part Revived stories where we've taken them together. This time we've chosen to separate Bad Wolf and The Parting of the Ways, for reasons that should be obvious if you've seen this story. Episode 1 is very much a reality TV show commentary, and then part 2 is a Dalek story. So
Yeah.
we got a lot of just cause to split these up, basically.
Well, it's quite interesting because when I was watching this episode again, there was a part of me that kind of wanted to do it as a two-parter because there's more to it. Like it's a two-parter, and I feel like I kind of want that kind of satisfying ending. But as you say, it's very different in content. It's very different in tone, and the type of Doctor Who story that it is, because I wouldn't call it like run of the mill, but like I feel like we've seen this sort of Doctor Who story done before, using sci-fi trappings to satirize particular elements of modern life.
Yeah.
I was actually having a lot of flashbacks to the Happiness Patrol while watching this. If you look at the scene where, for example, where Fitch gets vaporized by the android, and by the way, great, classic BBC move to actually get Anne Robertson to play the android. That's just...
Well, it's not just Anne Robertson. They got Davina McCall, who did the Big Brother
oh, really?
voiceover, and both of the What Not to Wear personalities, Trini and Susanna, were Trin-E and Zuzanna. So they got quite a few different BBC stars to reprise their themselves 200,000 years in the future.
Okay, that would make sense, because especially with the What Not to Wear thing, I mean, I don't think we... because like we're in Australia, I don't know if we ever really had an equivalent of that show here, so that part I didn't recognize. But Big Brother, of course, is a pretty big part of TV for a lot of people, even in this country. But yeah, it's really fun, and again, it's a classic BBC thing to do, and they would repeat it by, and I know I've said this example before, but I really have to bring it up again. The fact that they got Anne Widdecombe to show up in the Saxon propaganda video. That was just... I love that so much. Anyway.
Two different Annes.
The point is... Sorry?
Two different Annes. When you said Widdecombe, I thought you'd made a mistake, but you were referring to the Sound of Drums.
No, so... Point is, this is very much a sort of classic, Doctor Who satire story, and there are many moments where it was reminding me of the Happiness Patrol, such as when Fitch dies. It's got there's a weird kind of sadistic humor to it, which again is very similar to the Happiness Patrol. And then when you get to the the What Not to Wear androids, they've got kind of a freaky mad scientist thing going on. The fact that you've got one who's got like needles on their hands, like a Freddy Krueger thing, and the other one's got like a chainsaw for a hand, which I kind of love how weird and wacky and kind of messed up that is. Like, it just... it's kind of similar to the Candyman and also just the general atmosphere of the Happiness Patrol. So
it is kind of, yeah.
I don't know. I really dig that element of it. So
yeah, I mean, it's interesting watching this back because it is. You say it is kind of like it is sort of a run-of-the-mill-ish Doctor Who story where it's, we've got to escape from this thing. But the concept of being stuck in a futuristic reality show is very unique for Doctor Who. And there's a part of me that wants me to... There's a part of me that wishes this concept was the whole episode as opposed to like half of it. But then the other part of me is like, well, could they really stretch this concept to a full 40 minutes? I don't know if they could. So, like, combining it with this... with really the culmination of the... this extended story that we've been telling over the course of this season, and we'll get to that obviously, but bringing that back in is a really clever move on Russell T Davies' part. Jumping over to timescales before we get too in depth. Out of 230
Yeah, sure.
people, this episode has an average rating of 8.2. I think that's pretty much spot on, to be honest.
Yeah, my initial instinct is to, I don't know, like maybe go a little lower than that, but it's that I certainly understand why people say that. I mean, maybe I'll change my mind by the end of this podcast, but yeah, I might go a little lower, but it makes sense that people would feel that way because there are a lot of really good elements in this episode, to be sure.
Well, it's worth noting that this is the only two-part story from the Ninth Doctor where both parts have very distinct scores.
Really?
Yeah, Dr. Dances and Empty Child both had a 9.2.
Mm-hmm.
Aliens in London had a 6.2, and World War III had a 6.3. Bad Wolf has an 8.2, and Parting of the Ways has an 8.9.
Oh, wow.
There's only one.
Yeah, that is pretty sick.
There's only one Ninth Doctor story in between Parting of the Ways and Bad Wolf in the rankings, and it's Day of the Doctor, which, you know, I guess technically is a Ninth Doctor story. He's there for 3 seconds.
I think we ran into this problem before. Actually,
we did, yeah.
They were looking at Father's Day or something.
They put
anyway.
every appearance of the Doctor, of a certain Doctor, in their rankings. So this is the 5th highest rated Ninth Doctor episode, and it's part of the 4th highest rated story. It has an 8.1 for plot.
Yeah. I can't think of anything something major with plot problems, and the fact that they're sort of throwing in a lot, because as you say, there's a lot of different things poking satire at a bunch of different TV shows and sort of trends in media. Given that they're mixing all of that in with quite a more serious underlying story, and the supposed death of a main character, they're doing it all pretty well. It must be said.
Yeah, there are a couple of things that I noticed that I have questions about. We'll get to them a bit later on. So I don't think it's by any means a flawless plot. There are a couple of holes that I found, but overall, it's decently executed, and it's I think it knows how long it wants to commit to its main premise before it starts delving into what's really going on, which I think is one of its strengths. I think, like I said before, I don't think they could have carried this concept for 40 minutes. So the fact that they were able to sort of mix it up halfway through and keep the audience on your toes is a good, certainly a good thing, and it definitely leaves us with the best cliffhanger of the season. It has an 8.7 for acting.
8.7?
Yep.
Yeah, I'd believe that.
Yeah, no one's bad in this. That's actually pretty good.
Even the minor characters are good. The cameos are really fun. The fact that I absolutely love, because I know that there's kind of a, and Robinson had kind of a reputation of being very how shall I put it, standoffish, I guess.
Yeah.
In The Weakest Link, and the fact that she's being kind of mean to Rose in that bit where she's like, "Oh, do you work?" and just like, "Oh no, I just kind of travel." So that's another way of saying unemployed.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's clear that Anne Robinson is having fun with that role, and the fact that she's able to kind of poke fun of herself, I think, is really wonderful. And even the other cameos are good fun. The cosmetic surgeon androids, they're having a lot of fun with their crazy mad scientist antics. And even the minor characters, I'd really like Linda, actually.
Linda's great,
She's a really great performance and a really just a nice character, really endearing.
Really likable, and like from a very early point as well. Like it's
yeah.
Linda is endearing very, very, very quickly. And even in the all the minor characters, they do a good job of getting across really the nature of the world that we're finding ourselves in.
Yeah,
like all throughout the Weakest Link
building
segment, you can see like the dread in the contestants' faces while Rose is kind of dumbfounded at first. When someone's getting evicted in the Big Brother segment, you can tell that there's like a genuine camaraderie amongst the remaining contestants. The workers in the Bad Wolf Corporation, they have more to do next week, obviously, but for their roles here, they're really good.
Yeah.
Whoever plays the controller does a fantastic job.
Yeah, she's great. The cast really sort of help with the world building of getting the tension across, and I think it's a testament to both the performances but also the writing. They all have quite distinct personalities, which I think is pretty good because it would I think be quite easy to make a lot of those characters sort of one note. It's like, oh, they're scared, that's kind of it. But no, they put some fun little nuances. I like the fact that Strood's kind of he's kind of, I don't know, arrogant a little bit. It's almost like he's playing the stereotype of the annoyed TV show veteran who gets annoyed at the new upstart newcomer, but they still make that character quite fun. And as you say, there is a genuine camaraderie amongst rather the Big Brother contestants. So yeah, I think it's definitely testament to both the writing and definitely the performances that all of these characters work.
Yeah.
So yeah, good for them.
8.1 for effects.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing terribly.
Nothing stands out.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, they've got exterior shots of the space station. They look fine enough. The laser beam looks fine enough. Although I imagine that would have been fairly easy to animate.
Yeah.
I do definitely want to give a shout out though to the like sort of puppeteering animatronics of the androids. They're really I think quite good.
Yeah, definitely.
Again, the fashion, redesign androids in particular, they're really quite good. They've got a real I don't know, a presence about them, I suppose. And even the way like they're directed, the fact that you've got the creepy bit where one of them's holding up the Freddy Krueger hand with the syringes. It's just, I don't know, it's pretty impressive. And even the android herself, like when the head moves, it looks overall pretty convincing. Yeah, I like the design of the controller and the way that's even the way that's shot. And incidentally, I want to give a shout out to, as I have a number of times here, but I want to give a shout out to the direction.
Mm-hmm.
I love that bit where it's that quick backwards tracking shot where the guy presses the button and it quickly tracks back to reveal the whole control room. And I thought, what a great detail. And it's so, the sort of camera moves are just so exciting.
Yeah.
So good for them, honestly.
It has an 8.1 for replay value.
Yeah, I mean, I found it basically as enjoyable on a second watch, I suppose.
It doesn't fall apart at all.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm not sure. Look, because sometimes I'm not sure if I've said this before explicitly on the podcast, but when I watch these episodes, I like to watch them twice just in case I've missed something.
Yeah.
And a lot of the times when I'll watch a story the second time, I'll notice fun little details and nuances that I didn't pick up on. I don't think I noticed many the second time around, but certainly there's nothing when I watched it that made me think, oh yeah, this is making the story fall apart, or oh this wasn't really working. So yeah, it's certainly fine on replay value. Certainly quite enjoyable. Basically as enjoyable as it was the first time. So
yeah. 86 out of 107 people say this requires a previous story. I don't know whether the other 21 were thinking. This is the culmination of Series 1. It's almost... Without the rest of Series 1, so much of this would go over your head.
Yeah, even with the recap.
Oh yeah, it doesn't do enough.
It basically just sets up the world, and even then it doesn't even go to a lot of detail.
Yeah.
I think you'd certainly need several episodes to get acquainted, not least of all with the characters and their character dynamic. So yeah, I think it definitely requires a previous story. Excuse me.
Cool. Let's jump in. I want to take this sort of segment by segment, because it is a very sort of broken up narrative. So we've got
Yeah,
we've got the
it's
Big
kind
Brother
of weirdly
stuff.
episodic.
Yeah, we've got the Big Brother
Mm,
stuff, the Weakest Link stuff,
mm,
the What Not to Wear,
mm,
and the Satellite 5
mm.
stuff. Let's just take it in that order.
Yeah, sure.
So the Big Brother segment, it's a nice one to start the episode on because it's probably the best. It's a really high energy opening, which really
Mm.
conveys the how scrambled you'd be after sudden transmat from the TARDIS.
Yeah. The scattershot quality
Yeah,
of the characters' perspectives, it does that pretty well.
and it's also sets you up for a nice little bait and switch where the Doctor's like frantic. He's like, "Let me out of here! What's going on?" And then, oh, he's just in Big Brother.
Yeah,
It's
I
a
remember when. Sorry, you go.
it's a nice little opening that makes you go, "What's going on? Oh, what's going on?"
Yeah. I remember I had basically that reaction when I first saw it because I was, like 10 or 11 at the time. But my parents and me and my brothers would occasionally watch Big Brother because it was a big thing at that point on
Yeah,
on TV. And so when I saw it, I'm like, it's kind of, oh wow, two weird, totally different shows that I kind of like coming together. Whoa, what wacky world am I living in? It's kind of great for that reason, and the fact that like I can imagine that RTD must have had like a cheeky grin on his face, knowing how brazen he was being, putting these things together. Um, and it's one of those things where there's part of me that wants to say, "Oh, I'm sure there are other shows you could have gotten away with this on," but like I can't imagine many other shows doing this.
oh
Like
no,
it's one of those things, and I'm sure we'll probably discover this with other uh Doctor Who episodes from both classic and revival. There are some ideas in this show that are so wacky. You wouldn't think they would appear in the way that they do until you see them in Doctor Who, and then you realize, oh, only a show like this could have pulled them off. Um, and the fact that they pull it off as well as they do is even more testament to that. So that's kind of cool. Um, yeah, just
yeah,
wanted to point that out.
yeah. You touched on it real briefly, and it's a complaint that gets thrown around a fair bit for this episode, and I think it
Hmm.
is. It's not without merit. The fact that a lot of these reality show send ups have dated somewhat. Um,
Oh yeah.
Big Brother is
Yeah.
still very much recognizable, obviously.
Mm.
Weakest Link is I don't think it's on the air anymore, and What Not to Wear
No, I don't think
definitely
so.
isn't. What Not to Wear is
Yeah.
of the three is the one that suffers the most because I think that was a very like British centric show. I do remember it
Yeah.
did air in Australia, and the family. I remember watching a few episodes of it with the family on
Hmm.
occasion, so I
Hmm.
wasn't lost on that
Mm.
entirely. But it is worth noting that if you're not familiar with these shows, you won't get the
Yeah.
same kind of feedback that the
Hmm.
episode's trying to convey.
Hmm.
You'll obviously have heard of Big Brother. I think that's the one. It helps that
Mm.
that's the one the episode opens up with because it's the
Yeah.
most
It's the one that
globally
most people have
recognizable.
heard of. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think setting up with that and then going to these other things, even if you haven't heard of the other shows, you kind of get the impression from the Big Brother intro.
Yeah. I think it generally does a pretty good job there. The wonderful conflict in tone that you have these very kind of fun, light-hearted sort of reality TV shows, but with really fucked up consequences,
Yeah,
is really quite good. And it you may not know exactly what they are, but I think they handle them pretty well. The way they're framed in the narrative, the way they're written, and even kind of the way they're directed, you get that sense of fun. Like the fact that you have Rose basically laughing her ass off um, in this horrifying reality TV show, Death Trap, without knowing what it really is.
yeah,
Kind of helps with that. Now, having said all that, you're not wrong to point out that obviously by using such, contemporary sort of references, they're obviously going to be taking a risk there.
yeah, definitely.
And I think um, we it's very easy for us to say, well, oh, you can basically get the impression of what these shows are, but that's because we grew up then. We were kids at the time. We were aware of these shows, to varying degrees, of course, but still broadly aware of them. So if a new viewer was to watch this and think, what the hell is happening here? I think that's completely understandable. So I think you're right to point out, again, it is a risk, and for me, it's paying off pretty well, but it
Yeah,
may not pay off for certainly for other viewers.
I know. I think it pays off well enough. It
Hmm.
helps the segments that they choose. They all work for different reasons. Big Brother
Hmm.
works to set everything up, and it also,
Hmm.
uh, it's the one that you put the Doctor into because it's the one that he's going to be the most, you know, of the three of our main characters, he's the one that's going to be the most fed up with the whole thing.
Yeah, yeah, I'd
Um,
agree. It's a hmm.
yeah, with What Not to Wear, obviously you give that to Jack. It
Yeah,
plays into his vanity
yeah,
almost
yeah.
perfectly. And then the
Hmm.
atmosphere of the weakest link is really good for Rose, and we'll get more.
Hmm.
We'll touch more on that a bit more when we get to that segment. But
Hmm.
coming back to round to Big Brother for a sec,
Hmm.
we're not in the Big Brother house for all too long in the story. I think we spend like probably
No.
definitely less than 10 minutes in the house. Um, I think that it's really well written actually, that segment, because they mentioned early on that a character got evicted for damaging a camera, and then the Doctor is able to use that when he realizes what's going on to escape.
Hmm.
Um, Piecing together that if they'd gotten a transmat beam into the TARDIS, they could have taken them
Hmm.
anywhere. But the fact that they're in Big Brother means they're needed for something, not just death. So exploiting that to
Yeah.
escape is a really nice touch.
Hmm.
Um, is there anything else to discuss with Big Brother? Really, I mean, we can talk bit more about Linda here.
I'll mention just a couple of maybe brief things before we do.
Yeah.
So your point about sticking, these characters in the right settings is well made. I think putting the Doctor in Big Brother really does work. It's certainly in a narrative sense, but also in a thematic sense, because Big Brother, I don't know, maybe this is getting a bit meta, but like Big Brother, it's obviously, in some vague sense, sort of based on 1984, and the weird, restrictive, quasi totalitarian aspect of the show, which kind of, for the nature of the show needs to be, enforced. I'm saying that kind of in quotation marks, but even like in the real world, the show kind of has that totalitarian quality. I
Mm-hmm.
think it very much rubs up against the Doctor, who is very much an anti-totalitarian. And I
100%.
think
Yeah.
that works. It also works because, okay, Big Brother is kind of it's the show itself, both in the real world and it's also kind of portrayed here. There's kind of a really sort of vain, vapid quality to it, and I think the
Yeah.
Doctor really resents that even from the beginning. Like they said, yeah, we're broadcasting you from channel 44,000. Please do not swear, and the Doctor's like, you got to be kidding me. So
Yeah.
that sets up the tone, but also again thematically his conflict with the whole situation. So
Well, it
I
also
think,
that also works for when all the contestants are like, freaking out and panicking over who's going to be evicted, and they're
hmm,
seeing off the eliminated contestant with a guard of honor, and
hmm,
they're treating it like it's a big deal, and the Doctors, or they're like just
hmm,
having none of it. Obviously, he hasn't put together that it's a death
that it's
match. He's
yeah,
more seeing it like, oh, here we go, like you know, the glorification of this kind of media. I'm not about
yeah,
it. I'm just trying to get out
yeah,
of here. I've got to go through the whole process. Oh, fine, I'll sit through it. And then
yeah,
when it's revealed, well, when we think it's revealed that the contestants are being killed, he's immediately like very very angry about it, and he's yelling at them like,
yeah,
"Oh, is this worth your lives? Getting your face on TV?" Um,
yeah,
it's a really nice turnaround for the character. He goes from not taking the situation seriously at all to treating it the most seriously.
yeah. And I think like because that bit where he says, "Oh, look, I don't know why you guys are panicking. She'll go off. She'll sell a story, but make it big on the outside." Which again, sort of demonstrates that conflict that the Doctor has, even with the concept of a show like Big Brother.
Yeah.
Um, and the thing is that immediate switch from, oh, ha ha ha, this is dumb show, to, ooh, super scary, we're serious now. You theoretically could have had that reaction happen from any of the main characters, but I think it was more important that the Doctor um do it because, well, he's the main character, but also because, again, thematically, um that conflict would have been strongest within him. I mean, like, imagine, for example, if they put Rose in the Big Brother house. How would that have worked out? I'm not sure how it would have. But certainly, I don't think as well as it did with the Doctor. So
Yeah.
Overall, I think your point on that subject is well made. So Linda
Linda
with a Y.
Linda with a Y. I always love when they throw in details like that with character names. Like it comes up again in Silence in the Library, where it's like, I'm Dave. Well, I'm actually other Dave because that's proper Dave. He's the pilot. He was here first. Little stuff like that is really nice.
Yeah, it's fun.
But Linda, she's just a really, really charming and likable character in this, and she also serves a really good way of sort of making the Doctor the fish out of water character in a weird way.
Yeah, which is a nice subversion.
Yeah, she's there to be able to explain to him a lot about the world that they're in. The world, as it turns out, he helped create, which I think is something I've been touching on a little bit in the past, and I've been alluding to the fact that it gets brought up in a big way here, but exploring the consequences of what the Doctor leaves behind. It was brought up briefly in Boomtown. It came up a bit in the past as well. I think some other classic stories have touched on it. But here we get to see directly the fact that, the Doctor has, in the long game, he's gone off and he's destroyed the Jagrafess, and, he's set the fourth Grand Banner for Human Empire back on the right track. He assumes, but he doesn't stick around to help out or, check in on what's going on. He doesn't like to do that. He just likes to leave and move on. And as a result, sometimes this can happen where he sort of indirectly leaves the world in a worse place than when he left it.
Yeah. Which is a good exploration, because I don't think it's something that's really explored all that much even in the classic series. So the fact that RTD is aware of that and wants to sort of maybe not correct the past, but address those issues, I think is really good.
It also makes the title of the long game even more poetic, because it's directly name dropped in this episode where the Doctor's like, someone's been playing a long game, controlling the human race, and you hear that and you go, oh my god.
I must admit, that tiny little bit, I didn't love that bit of dialogue simply because I thought it was a little bit on the nose. Having said that, it may just be because, it's easy for me to say that with hindsight, because I've seen both of these episodes before. I don't know, I myself could have done without addressing it in such a straightforward way, because I would have preferred if I could just sort of figure out, oh, that's why the old one's called The Long Game.
Well, I think it's more for the direct confirmation that it's all part of the same plan. Like, you already know it's a sequel to Long Game because they're in the same location. But when you hear the Doctor say someone's playing a long game, you learn, oh wait, the people who installed the Jagrafess, they're also behind this. It's not the new people that are in. It's not some new force that have come in. It's that little extra level of feedback to the viewer that lets you go, so this is like some big thing happening here.
Yeah, actually, to be fair, the fact that because the fact that the Daleks have kind of manipulated the human race, like the controller basically says that.
Yeah.
But having that final confirmation that it goes all the way back to the Jagrafess, maybe even earlier.
Yeah.
I suppose you'd want that kind of confirmation to tie it all together, basically.
Yeah. But Linda's fantastic in this.
Yeah. I want to bring something up about Linda for a second.
Yeah.
And Cuff, throughout this podcast so far, you have slowly been nudging me closer and closer to the, Rose is actually written to be kind of a terrible character sort of camp. And I don't want to say that you've completely sold me on that idea for whatever reason, but as I think I said in the last Revival episode, I'm kind of finding less and less reasons to like her, and again, purely from a writing perspective, I watched this episode, and even the first time I watched it preparing for the podcast, I'm like, why isn't Linda the main character? Because I'm finding her more compelling and more endearing and more sort of compassionate and interesting than Rose is. Maybe not even by a lot, but certainly more. Not to mention the fact that when you think about it, Rose actually, I don't know if she's in, like, how much of the episode, just in terms of runtime, she's in, but even if she's in a fair bit of it, she doesn't do a lot. She just kind of, she laughs a lot with, when she's on the weakest link.
Yeah.
She gets scared when she realizes what's happening. Doctor shows up, she gets vaporized, in quotation marks, and then she just arrives on the Dalek ship, and that's basically it. She doesn't actually... Whereas Linda, you know, she's with the Doctor for a bit, she's explaining how the world works, and I mean, I'm not sure if she's taking, like, a super active role in sort of putting it all together, but I feel like she's taking more of an active role than certainly Rose is in this story, so...
I mean, Rose's role in the story is really just to set up the second episode, is to get her to the Dalek ship. By the way, interesting you pointed that out, so, she gets transmatted into Weakest Link. That's Rose gets captured or trapped number 9. And then she gets transmatted onto the Dalek ship. That's Rose gets kidnapped or trapped number 10.
Number 10.
It happens twice in this episode. Which I think sort of like shows like her main role in this story, and honestly in the season, is to be something for the Doctor to save.
Which is really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Honestly, like, it's... And I don't know.
Honestly, like I'll bring this up now. I don't know if you've rewatched Parting of the Ways yet, but pay attention to Rose anytime she and Linda are in the same scene together.
I will. I'll keep an eye out for that. And
yeah, just setting you up for that, because Jesus Christ, Rose is bad whenever Linda's around.
Well, and I'll say this too, and I don't know, maybe you'll disagree with this interpretation, but the fact that the writing in this, certainly in this episode, but as you say, the whole season basically makes Rose just someone, or really in a way something for the Doctor to save or to go after. Am I the only one who thinks that that's kind of sexist? Is that just me? Maybe that's just me, but I just think, like, man, surely you want your main character, who's the Doctor's companion, to be doing more than that.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know.
It sort of strikes me as a thing where it's like, because the main bulk of this season, the main mission statement of this season, and we'll get to this in Parting of the Ways, it's about the influence that the Doctor has on individuals. You know, the way he inspires them to be better people and live better lives. Because that's the mission statement of season 1, you kind of need the side characters to be the main people that are influenced in the individual episodes. You need them to be the characters that are changed by the Doctor. But that, and as a result, they kind of take on roles that a companion normally would, which kind of means that Rose gets sidelined for a lot of the time.
Oh, do you mean the side characters are the ones that have to...
Yeah. It's about the Doctor influencing these people that he's meeting for the first time. They do better things. They take active steps. And as a result, Rose has kind of a lot of agency taken away from her.
Yeah, which is... Yeah, I don't know. And I don't think it's like super deliberate or anything, but I just think it is just kind of unfortunate. But as you say, in a way, was kind of tricky because they kind of set themselves up for that sort of trap. Because if you look at even with Boomtown, as many flaws as we pointed out that it had, at least Margaret kind of has a fairly, I think, substantial character development, even if they kind of just toss it out the window in the end there.
Yeah.
But she's on the cusp of that kind of more character development. But you could argue that's the same for most of the side characters.
Oh yeah, you absolutely
can. As you say, it's how the Doctor impacts the lives of many, not just the lives of one. Like, they obviously focus on the characters on an individual basis, but when you add it all up, you think, oh, the Doctor really does impact all these people's lives, both for the good and the bad.
Yeah.
And because of that, unfortunately, the side characters, I would say, really in most of these stories, actually, maybe basically all of them, have more character growth and definitely more agency than Rose has, which is really kind of frustrating.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of sucks because, like, what we've got, if we just look at the side characters for a minute, that is really good. there have been some fantastic character arcs within each episode.
Yeah.
Whether it be Nancy, whether it be Rose's father, whether it be and pardon me, just remind me the name of the main side character, the psychic person from
Gwyneth.
Yes. Even her characterization. Even Jack, as you pointed out, with the Doctor dances and the Empty Child, he goes through a fairly sort of substantial character growth in that story too. And that's great. That's fantastic. But it's just such a shame that I don't know that Rose's agency say just gets kind of reduced.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just something I don't know. It just struck me, and I don't know. You could argue maybe that's the case for a lot of Doctor Who companions, like certainly in the classic series. But I don't know. It's just something unfortunate that just struck me, I suppose.
Just transitioning to the Weakest Link segment. The Weakest Link is the game we spend the most time in, and that's probably owing to the fact that Rose never escapes her game. She gets transmatted away. I think that this segment is probably the strongest of the three reality shows. It does by far the best job at ratcheting up the tension. And it kind of works in a weird way because when you watch an episode of Weakest Link, when it's down to the final two and they're doing the back and forth, that's the time where you're most like on the edge of your seat, like who's going to win. But this time it's really different for a couple of reasons. They're utilizing the same format, the who's going to win kind of thing, but it's combined with A, the element that one of them's going to die at the end of this, and B, you're in Rose's position where you're like, this is the year 200,100. I'm not going to know any of these. I'm just going to be like, blindly guessing for the most part. And I think the episode does it's really smart that it gives her a question that she knows the answer to early on to sort of keep her like, oh no, maybe she can do this. It helps that Roderick doesn't really get many answers right either. But whenever a new question is read out and you're just left there thinking, I have no frame of reference for what the answer could possibly be, and she's left to just throw out a guess, and they do the thing where they pause before the android says no. Like, it's genuinely tense in that final segment.
It is. It's pretty full on. I would say that is that the game show that gets the most screen time? I think it is.
It absolutely is, yeah.
Yeah. So obviously they kind of knew what they were doing. They knew they wanted to, keep ratcheting up this tension. They do a pretty good job of it. And the fact that the tone goes from, again, Rose just laughing, but then we see what happens at the Big Brother house, and there's kind of wonderful dramatic irony. And then the tension just keeps going and going. And when Fitch dies, that's quite tragic, and kind of grotesque in a way. Again, to take it back to the Happiness Patrol, I had a lot of flashbacks, even purely in regards to the tone. That you've got this kind of weird, sort of funny but really fucked up, sort of cruel satiric tone just going on, which I think is one of the key elements to why the tension keeps getting ratcheted up, which is really, really great to see. But yeah, it even just watching Rose's character progression from ha ha ha, oh shit, to even more, oh shit. And then that really kind of it's almost sickening when the other guy who wins, when he's celebrating and he's laughing, and you realize there's something really kind of icky and sort of fucked up that this guy is so happy that, oh, this other person's gonna die and I'm not. And I get that obviously, if you're gonna live in a do or die situation, that's a good thing, but you realize, wow, this whole Satellite 5 situation, this is super repulsive.
Yeah, it's a terrible world that they're living in.
Yeah. Like, and the fact that just gets confirmed, I think it's later on when Lynch just tells the Doctor, yeah, when you win, you get to live. And, isn't that enough? It's like, what? It's a wonderful sort of rug being pulled out from the audience's feet moment. So yeah, it's a really good concept actually, and it's funny. But you said that you're not sure. I think you said you weren't sure how much you could stretch this concept out. I actually think you could stretch it out really for a whole episode. I would actually really love to see the Doctor and the companions in these different game shows, and it helps because they're all in these different sections. It is a very episodic sort of narrative, so
Yeah.
you could really just have as many different sort of game shows as you wanted. I mean, not going too far, obviously, but having a lot of different game shows and having them sort of go through them and having to sort of find each other. I think you could honestly stretch that out into a whole episode, and I would happily watch it, if I'm completely honest. Obviously, though RTD had to bring in the Daleks and the whole connection to Satellite 5, which he does pretty well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would be happy to watch even this first segment, the first half, as a whole story myself. You wonder even, I mean, they probably realistically couldn't have done it because there's already enough in the long game. But like, I almost kind of wish they took this stuff and combined it with some of the other elements in the long game and just made it one episode. I don't know. I feel like that would have been really interesting because just the themes of media manipulation and the fact that you've got in the long game you've got these people basically spreading fake news, but then sort of sedating the audience with cheap dumb reality TV that's also really really messed up. I kind of wish they combined those two ideas into one episode. That would have been really interesting. As it is, though, it still works pretty well.
Yeah. Before we move on to the Satellite 5 stuff properly, Jack in What Not to Wear is just a bit of fun. Like, it's not really the highest drama. There's something kind of comical when the chainsaw arm comes out as well.
Yeah, it's so wacky and kind of just funny, and I don't know, I think that those sorts of things, it appeals to the inner horror fan and death metal head in me. It's so wacky and strange.
Well, it's like juxtaposing the basic general fashion advice, don't wear black with color, makes the color look cheap and the black look boring. And then after that, it's like, I wonder what you'd look like with like your face half missing, or like we're gonna like
or your legs stitched to the middle of your chest, and nothing's too extreme.
Yeah, exactly. Like that juxtaposition is fun. But I think the episode is right to not focus on that element too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Because you've already got even in that first half, as I said, with the weakest link segment, you've already got a really good combination of the dark humor and the really serious, terrifying implications of it. And I think RTD knows not like how much to focus on that for the audience. And the thing with Jack, like even though in its own way it's getting kind of even more extreme than the others, because again, needle knife hands and chainsaws and stitching different pieces of your body to other parts. It's so ridiculous and over the top, you're kind of forced not to take it seriously, but that's the point. And that's why they mix it in with the comedy of, oh, yeah, ladies, I think your viewership just went up, and oh, the little particle disintegrator, where were you hiding that? And,
yeah.
And I think Jack is kind of, as a character, is kind of built for those moments. He's very good, not just in this episode, but generally he's good at being the comic relief. So the fact that they focused on it kind of the least, but also gave it this sort of funny tone, works. And it also kind of works with Jack's character, because, like, the Doctor probably could have gotten out of that. Maybe he could have used his sonic screwdriver, but the fact that he's just got this laser, in him, and just blasts the heads off these two androids. Again, that's a very Jack thing to do. So I don't know whether it's a case of RTD writing the scene around the character, but it still works really well.
It does make you wonder. Like the weakest link, there's a lot of security around there. Like as soon as the Doctor and Jack burst in, they're like swarmed in an instant. There's clearly not that same level of care or like security around the What Not to Wear show. Like, Jack is able to destroy the androids and then create a gun out of the defabricator and leave, and, like, he's unattended almost. It kind of... in the strange meta-narrative of that fact, it leaves you to wonder, okay, well, What Not to Wear must have a really low viewership then.
Well, maybe they just think that, with the defabricator, like, oh, well, maybe they've been stripped of their weapons as well, so they can't possibly do anything, but
Yeah, that's true.
But it's a good point. Maybe it does have a low viewership. I wonder
Um,
if I don't know whether that's a meta
yeah.
commentary on. Anyway,
Let's move on to Satellite 5 properly. We find out
Yeah,
that they're
sure.
named the Bad Wolf Corporation, and here's where we properly get to the Bad Wolf is going to be important, and it has been important this whole time. But then Jack and the Doctor are trying to find Rose. They eventually find out where she is, but it's too late, and she gets blasted by the android and is seemingly disintegrated in what is a very, very effective sequence where we're just focusing on the Doctor's face. There's a lot of action around, but it's all getting drowned out. He's barely listening. He's just trying to, he's, processing another companion death. And he doesn't say anything for a long time. He goes through a big interrogation. He's like, he's taking the mug shots. You really feel his pain in that segment.
Yeah.
And then it immediately transitions to rage in a really, really... It's another really effective segment where he just says to Jack, let's do it, and they beat up the guards, and the Doctor picks up a big old gun, and you're like, oh my god, this is a situation where he's been pushed to his limits. What's he going to do? Yeah,
and he doesn't fire it in the end.
He doesn't fire it. No, he was never going to fire it. And it's a really nice bait and switch, and it's a lovely little comedic moment where he gives Davidge Pavel his gun, and then he's like, "But I've got your gun. All right, shoot me. Give me the information I need. Can I put the gun down now, please?"
It's almost it almost seems like a bit of foreshadowing, because it's like like the Dalek Emperor says in The Parting of the Ways, "What are you, Doctor? Coward or killer?" And he says, "Coward any day."
Yeah.
Which is kind of neat that they're sort of working in those details even in this way, which is really wonderful. But yeah, there's a lot of wonderful little bits to really like about sort of the back part of that episode. The really wonderful bit where the woman says, we were just doing our jobs, and the Doctor's like, and with that statement, you just lost the right to even talk to me.
Yeah.
Which is great. That's a classic Doctor Who thing to do.
Yeah, definitely.
And it feels, and like RTD knows when to put those moments in and how to give them the most weight.
Yes.
And it feels so, like the Doctor realistically could have said that kind of at any time, but the fact, again, as you say, that he's been pushed to his limits, he's lost a companion, that's what's going to really get him to the place where he's going to need all these people for, doing all these horrific things, because, I don't know, it was their job. So I love, little moments like that, and the fact that it feels completely appropriate, it's placed in the narrative, I think pretty pitch perfectly. But as you say, the fact that it becomes quite serious pretty quickly.
Yeah.
It all sort of really works. It all just kind of comes together in that last third. Yeah.
Yep.
I
enjoyed
that element.
We learn from the controller that it's a really nice conversation where, like, and the Doctor's asking her who her masters are, but she keeps on like describing their influence and their power and their might. It really starts to fill you with this like chilling dread of like, who could they possibly be? I don't know how quickly you would guess it was the Daleks, primarily because it's been set up that there's none left. But we then, this is where I bring up a plot hole that I referenced a bit earlier. We learned that the disintegrator beams are actually transmats, and that the people who are killed in the games get transported all the way across space to the Dalek Crucible, where they are converted into Daleks. We don't learn that much yet. We find that out next time. But at the very least, we learned that when the Big Brother housemates get evicted, they're not actually being killed. And when people are zapped by the android, they're not actually getting killed. And when people have their limbs torn apart by the androids in What Not to Wear, I guess they just get their limbs torn apart, right? I mean, if we're setting up that the people who get killed in the games are actually like, this entire thing is made as like a meat processing Dalek factory.
Yeah, well,
and and there's only like 2 games that actually give the Daleks people like Linda lists off a lot of the other games that we don't get to see. None of them involve disintegrator beams. They're like Countdown, there's a bomb, Stars in Their Eyes.
Get blinded.
There's a game where people have to live with a bear. I don't know how that could possibly factor into the Daleks' plan. You know, it just kind of seems like I don't know if like you would think that all the games would involve the Daleks getting their meat, right? But they really don't. It's really only like a couple, which leads you to believe, well, why isn't it that? Why isn't it? Why aren't all the games giving the Daleks people to turn into more Daleks? It just seems like a waste otherwise, right?
Especially because I'd forgotten actually about the conversion element that gets brought up in Parting of the Ways. But the Doctor says there's, it would have to be at least 500,000 Daleks on all those spaceships. Presumably they've gotten most of those from the human conversion element. So if that's the case, wouldn't it be the case that every show has to end with either the particle disintegrator or something where the meat is getting brought to the the harvest floor.
Yeah.
So, I can forgive that generally. I can basically just assume that, again, because 44,000 channels, there must be like so many different shows on each channel. I can imagine that there's enough that a lot of these people are just getting it's converted.
It might be a case where, like, when the satellite first started broadcasting these kinds of shows, they were all disintegrator beam kind of things. But then they added more and more shows, and
they had to diversify.
Yeah, exactly. Like, and
had to branch out.
Long enough after the initial people set up Satellite 5, who presumably were working for the Daleks in some way to set this all up. New people came in and weren't made aware of the Daleks' plan. They were just like, okay, we're killing people in these games. How can we kill them in interesting ways? Because we're losing viewership. Gotta tie this back into the big underlying element of this season, which is about corporate greed being a factor in these villains' plans, and making a lot of money. We've got to get the ratings up, so let's find new and exciting ways to take old TV formats from hundreds of thousands of years ago and mold them into twisted machinations of televisual pleasure.
It's again, I can understand why you'd say that if that's not like a full-on plot hole, it's certainly like plot hole adjacent. But for me, I'm pretty willing to forgive that.
Oh no, me too. To the point where, like, I've been watching this episode. I've known about this episode for a while. I've watched it a bunch, but it was only on this viewing that I picked up on it, and that's like 5 viewings in. So it's not a terribly important thing to bring up. What is important to bring up is it's a Dalek plan. The Daleks are back. What a big twist this is. What a huge bombshell. What a ginormous cliffhanger. Except that if you watch the Next Time trailer at the end of Bad Wolf,
they give it away.
They straight up show the Daleks in the Next Time trailer, even though that's the twist ending of this episode.
Yeah.
Yet another thing that Bad Wolf and Boomtown does badly. It's another nail in Boomtown's coffin.
It is a shame, and it's funny, but we'll be talking about this slightly with the next classic story we're going to do.
Yeah.
But that was a problem where if you had a Dalek story or a whatever story, a lot of the time they'll just put blank of the Cybermen or blank of the Daleks or whatever, and they'll give it away, and it sucks. It's so strange that obviously, when they're bringing back these classic villains, you obviously want to make it as dramatic as possible. You want to make those dramatic punchlines hit as hard as they can.
Yeah.
But I honestly think, maybe I'm missing something here, but I think the Earthshock, for example, which doesn't have Cybermen in the title, that's like the exception. There aren't many stories in the classic series in which they have a big revival villain that they don't give it away. I mean, there are maybe a few, but
it's an odd one.
which is so frustrating because I've mentioned it before, but Death to the Daleks, that was an amazing experience watching that story for the first time. But the only reason it was is because when we watched it on TV, we missed the opening credits. I had no idea it was a Dalek story,
Right.
so it's kind of this is the point is this is clearly a pattern that has happened a lot in even Classic Who, and the fact that even at this point that they haven't learnt from that is kind of frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Because it would have been great if we didn't know that the Daleks were here and that they came in, because it's been pretty well established that the Daleks, they don't exist supposedly anymore.
yeah. Well,
So
it's a pattern that's going to continue in like a lot of what we're about to like. A huge amount of New Who will continue this pattern. I remember at the start of series 10, after the first episode of that aired, they did a big sizzle reel for what's to come in the season, and it ended with the reveal that John Sims' Master was returning, which is a big twist at the end of that episode when he first shows up. And I remember at the time, because it had been rumored for a bit, but I was watching it with someone who hadn't heard the rumors. I mean, and that he showed up in the next time in the trailer, and I was like, no, why would you do that? It got to the point where I just like whenever I recommend to anyone to start watching Doctor Who, I'm always like, okay, so they're gonna show next time trailers at the end of each episode. Do not watch them. Don't watch any of them. And the show will eventually do it. Like, I don't know. I think by the time it gets to, and it's honestly the best thing that Chibnall Era does. It standardizes putting the next time trailers after the credits, so that you can have a lot of time to back
decide
out
if you want to.
Yeah, I mean, the RTD era will start putting next time trailers for 2-part stories after the credits. And it will get to a point where 2-part stories start to not have next time trailers at all in upcoming seasons. But I don't think it's until the Chibnall era that they start properly being like, okay, credits and here, then after that, here's what's coming next.
Yeah.
Which is a very nice thing that they did.
Yeah.
But
kudos to Chibnall.
Yeah, I know, right? It's not if we get to say that.
I wonder how many times we'll be saying that.
Maybe like I could probably count on one hand the amount of times we'll be saying that in the future. But if you didn't watch the next time trailer, it's a really nice Dalek reveal. It comes
pretty good.
It comes in waves where it's like Rose is alone on a ship. She sees something she recognizes. She reacts with horror. And then you see out the Dalek's eye stalk, where it's like you might not instantly pick up on it. You see the plunger come into frame, and then a bit later you see the distorted reflection of the Dalek appear when it confronts the controller.
Yeah. Or even when Rose arrives on the ship, you hear the which is I think at that point it had been established as a sort of, I think it's a classic Dalek sound. Anyway, so there's that. The shot of Rose, it's from the Dalek's perspective, and the plunger just comes up. I'm convinced it's actually a callback to the first time we see a Dalek in the Daleks, way back in the with the first Doctor, because notably that's how it happens. You don't actually see the Dalek; you see it from the perspective of the Dalek. You see the Dalek coming after Barbara, and then the sucker cup just comes up into view, and like, oh, what's this freaky thing that she's so terrified of? And I'm convinced that was a callback, and it actually works quite well.
Yeah, and it leads into the finale of this episode, which is the Doctor and the Daleks having their little conversation. The Daleks threaten the Doctor, and he says no. And it's such a great scene.
Yeah.
Like, Chris Eccleston's performance is so good. He's done with the Daleks. He's so done with them. He's had to go through the Time War. He's had to kill them all and his own people, and now he's seeing them back again. He's like, well, this is it. I am going to rescue Rose and kill all of you.
Yeah. And it's another element when he says, you have no plan, and the Doctor's like, yeah, and doesn't that just scare you to death? That's a nice little moment too. Because it points out something which, certainly as a kid, I didn't really pick up on, but once it had been pointed out to me, like, actually, yeah, the Doctor, like, they're very good at improvising, and there's actually, I think it happens with the Fourth Doctor in the Invasion of Time, which is a Sontaran episode, but the Doctor says, I'm very dangerous when I don't know what I'm doing. and that's kind of great because the Daleks are these kind of, I mean, they do kind of act kind of rashly and hysterically because that's just what they are, but they try to be a very cold, calculating, um, species. So having that come at odds with the Doctor's improvisational skills,
Yeah, and it leads
is really good.
It leads into after the Doctor and the Daleks have the conversation, they panic and start the invasion, and we see probably more Daleks in one shot than we've ever seen before this point. I mean, I can't imagine we ever see like halls upon halls of Dalek light things flashing with all of them saying exterminate, like overlapping each other. It becomes this like this Machiavellian cacophony of exterminates that start drowning each other out, and it's terrifying.
The closest things I can think of that are like that would be, I think, 2 times in the classic series in Power of the Daleks, which unfortunately is a lost episode, but I think there's still a clip that survives if you see basically a factory assembly line of Daleks being built, and just see them coming out of this thing, which is really cool. And then there's another bit in, I think it's Planet of the Daleks, where there's like an ice volcano, and there's like hordes of Daleks. They're obviously miniatures, but they're all beneath this ice volcano, and it erupts, and the icy water just washes all the Daleks away. But as you point out, even then, this is like the most amount of Daleks we've seen, like in a few shots in the whole series, certainly up to this point.
And it's
because even in those other examples, there are many of them, but not this many.
Yeah, and it's so effective.
Not 500,000.
It's so effective for a new viewer as well, because they'll have in their minds the previous Dalek episode and how much of a nightmare one Dalek was to take care of.
Yeah.
And then when you see thousands of them in one shot, it just leaves you with this big sinking dread in your gut where you're like, oh, well, this is it. Like, what the fuck are we supposed to do about this?
How the hell is the Doctor going to get out of this one?
Yeah, but also it highlights, and it's something that this finale does really well, it highlights the Doctor Dalek dynamic. The fact that they do have this latent fear of the Doctor based on their history. And it really is like the Doctor's call to action in this finale that sets up the Daleks doing their invasion now. They actively say, the Doctor's initiating hostile action, we have to do our plan now then. It's gonna crop up a bit more in the future where we're gonna see the Daleks, with victims at the ready, and then they sense the Doctor's there and they'll turn away and immediately all swarm the Doctor. It's such a fascinating dynamic, and it's so one of the most interesting things the show has going for it. It's the longest relationship in the show's history beyond the Doctor and the TARDIS itself. It's this long-standing, by this point, 2005, 42-year relationship that just keeps getting added onto until Asylum of the Daleks ruins it. And the highlighting that in this finale is something that makes it even more so than the Time War element so personal to the Doctor.
Yeah, for sure. The fact that he has this hatred for this whole species, which is like kind of understandable. And the fact that the writers are kind of exploiting that history to sort of bring this episode specifically, but also the season to a head, I think is really effective. And I guess it would be more effective even like if you know who the Daleks are, because certainly when I was a kid when watching this, even watching the on Next Time trailer thing, that was really exciting, seeing the Daleks showing up again. It's like, oh wow, it's super spooky and great. And then in the end of this episode, when the Doctor's like, when it has the preview for the next episode, and it's like, oh, how did the Daleks survive? And you hear this thundering deep voice, they survived through me. It's one of those great moments, I think, for long-term Who fans, because we then start the guessing game, thinking, "Ooh, what supervillain is that? Is it the Emperor? Is it Davros? Ooh, what's happening?" And as a kid, I think I even thought, "Oh my god, are they bringing Davros back? Because Davros is like my favorite villain in Doctor Who of all time. So that'd be so great." It wasn't, but still, the fact that the writers understand this, understand the relationship that the fans, long-term fans especially, will have with these characters, and when they know how to exploit it, my god, it's just so satisfying. Yeah. So even though they're in only a tiny little bit in this episode, they are used to such brilliant effect. And kudos to RTD for doing that, frankly.
100%, yeah.
Mm.
I don't think there's much more to discuss, really. I mean, we've teed up the finale nicely. There's all the balls are in the air. They're there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess we just score it? I think we're done, right? We've basically gone through this chronologically, which is something we don't often do. We've sort of taken it scene by scene almost, and we've come to the ending, and we're done, right?
Yeah, I think so. I don't think there's anything else to bring up.
I think this is a solid 8. I think the timescales had it right the first time. It's an 8 out of 10. There's not a lot this episode does wrong. It can be a little slow in parts, which isn't really a bad thing, but it, some scenes, the What Not to Wear segments, I think they drag a little bit. They probably could have chosen a bit more. They might have been able to pick a more interesting third show for Jack to do, but it works fine enough, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the stuff on Satellite 5 before the Doctor and Jack rock up does also drag a bit. There's the dynamic between the two workers, which will be explored a little bit more in the next episode. Before you get there, though, you're kind of like, who are these people? What's going on? Again, it doesn't really do anything wrong. It doesn't excel tremendously. It's probably, in isolation, it's probably RTD's best single script so far.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think it's an 8.
Yeah, I think I do really enjoy this story. I feel like having these two sort of distinct parts, you've got freaky reality TV show and scary Dalek stuff.
They're not the greatest combination.
Sorry?
They don't combine the best.
Yeah, I think I want them to sort of transition more smoothly. Or as I said, I honestly would have preferred it if even there were separate episodes. Again, if you took the reality TV show stuff, stuck it onto the long game in some way, even getting rid of Adam for that matter, which
I don't think you'd have many complaints.
Yeah. By doing that would have made that episode way more interesting. And it does get a little bit jarring for me that we transition from that to, oh wow, super serious Dalek stuff. That's,
Yeah.
But again, without the reality stuff, how much of an episode would they have had? And it all kind of they have to fit it together. And having said that, for what this episode is, they're actually doing it pretty well. Again, not perfect, but they're meshing all these really crazy ideas together pretty satisfyingly, and even the bits where it seems to drag or meander a little bit with the reality TV show stuff, the What Not to Wear bit, as you say, I really enjoy those bits. Again, as I've said, I really enjoy the What Not to Wear bit because it's weird and freaky and appeals to the horror fan in me. But I still quite enjoy it. So yeah, I think I'm actually going to give it an 8 as well. Again, certainly not perfect. There are a couple of flaws here, but what we get is really entertaining and compelling. And the fact that they're able to mesh all of these ideas together as well as they are is really quite impressive. And some nice characterization, really good performances, and great, Doctor moments, which is great. So yeah, I think I'll give it an 8 as well.
All right. So next week we might be looking at the Sontaran experiment. I say might because this episode is the last episode we're uploading in September 2022, and October is the currently slated release date for the Centenary Special, which has a name. It's called The Power of the Doctor. It's a name that terrifies me to my core, but we'll get to that in a future episode. So we're now at the point where we're expecting a trailer any day now, if we haven't already by the time this episode gets uploaded. When the trailer goes up, we're going to be immediately almost recording an episode where we discuss the trailer and do some speculation for
Mm.
the Power of the Doctor. So that's going to slot in whenever it happens. So we say that the next episode is Sontaran Experiment. If a trailer gets uploaded to YouTube, it'll be the trailer discussion.
Yep.
We can't say for certain yet. But yeah, Power of the Doctor, absolutely terrifying name. I'm so nervous for that story, purely based on its title.
90 minutes of Chibnall.
It's 90 minutes of Chibnall, but also Power of the Doctor makes me think they're absolutely doubling down on Timeless Child stuff.
Oh,
which
yeah,
is
they
something that is deeply like.
Yeah, I'll be very surprised if they don't try to completely blow apart the world building even more. I mean, we might get lucky and they'll do a retcon of the retcon that's already happened, but
oh please,
even then, even if they do that, even if they do this thing where oh no, don't worry guys, the Timeless Children thing, that didn't really happen, we're back to normal timey-wimey shenanigans. Even if they do that, it's still gonna look bad, yeah? It's still gonna be...
Well, if they do that, it's just gonna be, okay, so you're confirming that this era did not matter.
Yeah. And how that's going to age so badly if they do that, right? Oh my god.
Anyway, we're not discussing that now. That's its own.
We're going to do that later.
That's going to be its own discussion. Christ, the first time I read The Power of the Doctor, literally I just went, oh no.
Oh man.
But yeah, next week it's either going to be the Sontaran Experiment or a discussion of the trailer of Power of the Doctor if it comes out. Until then, I've been Alex.
I've been Fitz, and remember, never wear black with colours.
It makes the colour look cheap and the black look boring.
There it is.